Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, my dear students. This is Dr. Muhammad Shafiq again, lecturer of philosophy at Department of Islamic and Pakistan Studies, and I'm your instructor of philosophy, teaching you the course called Introduction to Philosophy. The course code is PHI 101. This is lecture number 17. And this is the second part of the previous lecture in which we discussed what is idealism in metaphysics. And now we are going to look into more detail of idealism as a school of thought in philosophy. So in this part of lecture on idealism, we are going to discuss what is idealism briefly, although we have discussed it in previous lecture, but just to give you a brief description, and then we are going to discuss what are the different types of idealism. So first let's look into what does idealism mean. Idealism in philosophy is any view that stresses the central role of ideal or the spiritual in the interpretation of experience. It may hold that the world of reality exists essentially as spirit or consciousness, or in words of Hegel, an absolute spirit. That abstractions and laws are more fundamental in reality than sensory things, or at least that whatever exists is known in dimensions that are chiefly mental in character through and as ideas. The world of this reality of experience basically is founded upon ideas, founded upon mental reality rather than objects, rather than physical things or sensory things. Idealism contends that reality in nature is ideal. That's it. It's nothing more than idea. Idealism is the way of interpreting human experience and the world which places emphasis on mind as in some way prior to the matter. Just as materialism emphasizes matter, so does idealism stresses upon mind. Whereas materialism says that matter is the real and mind is an accompanying phenomena, idealism contends that mind is real and matter is in a sense a byproduct of mind. On the negative side, idealism is a denial that the world is basically a great machine to be interpreted in terms of matter and mechanism or in terms of energy and the physical sciences alone. More positively, idealism is a world. Idealism believes in a world or worldview or metaphysics that holds that the basic reality is constituted of or closely related to mind, ideas, thoughts, or selves. The real is the rational and intelligible. It's not something sense experiential. The world has a meaning apart from its surface appearance. So it's not the real which is apparent, which we see in this physical world. There is a reality behind that. The approach to the meaning of things is through the self rather than through objective analysis of nature. The world is interpreted by means of a study of the laws of thought and of consciousness, and not exclusively by means of objective science, as the science would say. Since the universe has a meaning, there is a kind of inner harmony between the world and man. What is highest in spirit is also deepest in nature. Man is at home in the universe and not an alien to a mere creature of a chance. Since the universe is in some sense a logical and spiritual system, the self is not an isolated entity, it is genuine part of the world process. This process at its high levels manifests itself as creativity, mind, and selves or persons. Man, as a part of the cosmos, expresses its inner structure in his own life. Nature on the objective world is real in the sense that it exists and demands our attention and adjustment to it. Nature, however, is not sufficient in and of itself, since it depends to a certain degree upon mind. In nature we find matter, life, mind, and values. Idealists believe that nature is to be interpreted in terms of its later and higher manifestations rather than in terms of its earlier and lower ones. Idealists are willing to let the physical scientists tell us what matter is, providing they do not reduce everything in the world to that category. So for idealists, the reality cannot be reduced to simply matter. They are willing to let the biological sciences describe life and its processes, providing they do not reduce all other levels to the biological or physiological. Idealists stress that organic unity of the world process, whole and parts cannot be separated except by a dangerous abstraction. There is an inner unity, an unfolding series of levels from matter to vegetable forms, through animals to man, mind, and spirit. Thus, a central principle of idealism is that of an organic whole. So, the idealists see the whole world as an organic whole, and they do not see it in segregation or in parts. So this is basically what idealism is in a nutshell. Now uh, let's move on to today's lecture. Uh, what is the outline of today's lecture? It is what is idealism, as we have already discussed, and now we are going to discuss what are the different types of idealism. What is subjective idealism? What is transcendental idealism? What is absolute idealism? And what is objective idealism? And at the end, we are also going to touch upon some other types of idealism, but they are not as important as these four major types of idealism. So now we are going to start to look into what are the different types of idealism. So idealism as a school of thought in philosophy is divided into various types depending upon explanation of reality and its existence it presents. In principle, all of idealists, they agree that reality is ideal in nature or is dependent upon idea. But on the other hand, they also differ in between themselves, that depending upon the explanation of reality and its existence it presents, although it is ideal in nature, but how it has been related to human beings, uh, that's where they differ. So, although the main principle of idealism remains the same as reality being ideal or abstract in nature, philosophers differ in explaining this principle in different types. Although there are several types of idealism, but there are four major types of idealism discussed in this lecture as mentioned in the previous slide. So we are going to look into these four types of uh, idealism, and in this first one comes the subjective idealism. This type of idealism is sometimes called mentalism or even phenomenalism. It is the least significant and prevalent type, and the one most frequently attacked by the opponents of idealism. Minds or spirits and their perceptions or ideas are all that exist. The objects of experience are not material things, they are merely perceptions. Things such as buildings, trees, etc. exist, but they have no independent existence of what we call the real world. They have no independent existence apart from our mind perceives. How our mind perceives them, that is how they exist. The subjective idealist does not deny that the existence of what we call the real world. The question at issue is not its existence, but how it is to be interpreted. It is not independently real apart from a knower. No one can get outside or beyond his own experience. This type of idealism is probably best represented by George Berkeley, as we discussed in our previous lecture. He was an Irish philosopher. Berkeley accepted the psychology of John Locke, and John Locke said that our knowledge deals only with ideas. Locke accepted the existence of spiritual substance, ideas, and material substance. He distinguished between the primary qualities of matter, such as form, extension, solidity, figure, motion, numbers, and so on, and secondary qualities, such as colors, sounds, tastes, odors, and the like. The secondary qualities are not in the material substance, they are in the mind, or they are the way in which primary qualities affect the mind or knower. The secondary qualities vary from person to person. Berkeley went further than Locke and said that the primary qualities have no existence apart from our minds. So figure, motion, number, extension, they don't have any existence without our mind. Berkeley insists that these qualities are basically dependent upon our mind, hence reducing the existence of these qualities to ideas or ideal in nature. An idea, according to Berkeley, is an object known. objects exist only as they are perceived. So his famous quotation is, to be is to be perceived. Subjective idealism is also called solipsism or subjectivism or dogmatic idealism or maybe immaterialism and so on. It is the doctrine that the mind and ideas are the only things that can be definitely known to exist or have any reality. And the knowledge of anything outside the mind is unjustified. Thus, objects exist by virtue of our perception of them as ideas residing in our awareness and is the consciousness of divine being or God. For Berkeley, existence was tied to experience, and that objects exist only as perception and not as matter separate from perception. So he claimed to be is to be perceived. Now, what does this quotation mean? For Berkeley, or for subjective idealism, in order to exist, an object must be perceived by a perceiver. That basically means that if something has not been perceived by anyone, that simply does not exist. And this perception is basically the knowing of the primary qualities of an object. And those primary qualities only can be known through mind. So anything which needs to exist must be perceived. When someone asks him that, okay, fair enough, if this world is not perceived by anything, does it mean it does not exist? Berkeley would say that no, this world, even if it is not perceived by any one of us, it is perceived by the God. Hence, it does exist. So, subjective idealism basically contends that the existence of the outer world and their primary qualities depend upon our mind to perceive. Hence, they are dependent upon mind. That is why, and that mind is subjective. That is why they are called subjective idealists. I hope it does make a sense, and if it does not, uh, you can contact me by any means, and I can further explain it to you. Now, next comes the transcendental idealism. The transcendental idealism, or it is also called critical idealism, it is the view that our experience of things is about how they appear to us or representations, not about those things as they are in and of themselves. The term transcendental was used quite frequently by Immanuel Kant while explaining the reality. Transcendental idealism does not deny that an objective world, external world to us, does not exist, but argue that there is a suprasensible reality beyond the categories of human reason, which are called noumena, roughly translated as things in themselves. The doctrine was first introduced by Immanuel Kant and was also espoused by John Gottlieb Fichte and Frederick Schelling, and later resurrected in 20th century by Edmund Husserl. The main difference between this type of idealism from others is that they contend that although reality is ideal in nature and the external world does exist, but the primary qualities which we come to know through our mind, they also do exist, but there is some part of reality which is transcendental, which is noumena, and that has been translated as things in itself, things in themselves. They cannot be known. In this way, they not only declare that reality is ideal in nature, but also admit that there is certain limitation to our knowledge, and man cannot know everything or everything inside out. The term transcendental means something above, something beyond our mind. That is why they use this term transcendental idealism, because they come up with this idea of noumena, things in themselves which are not possible to be known. And that is how Immanuel Kant championed epistemological world by saying that there are certain parts of reality which our mind cannot be is not capable to know. And his philosophy, uh, when he discusses it, he calls it antinomies. He says that, for example, while trying to prove the existence of God, when we use the causal argument that there is a cause behind every effect, and so on and so forth. So this world, for example, is the effect and the cause is God. He goes on and says, if we apply this argument wholeheartedly, that would see that, okay, this world is the effect of a cause, which is God. So what is the cause of God then? Because this law of causation says every effect has a cause. So there must be a cause behind that, behind God. But we are unable to know that. Hence, there is a part of reality for transcendental idealists which cannot be known, and that they call is noumena. And that is why their idealism is called transcendental idealism, because there is something which transcends our minds, which we cannot know, and that is what they call transcendental idealism. It is, although it is a bit uh, complicated, but I hope it does make a sense. And if it does not, then please let me know and I will further explain. Now comes another type of idealism, which is objective idealism. Now, objective idealism is the view that the world out there is in fact mind communicating with our minds. It postulates that there is only one perceiver, and that this perceiver is the one with that which is perceived. According to the objective idealism, the absolute is all of reality. No time, no space, relation, or even ever exists or occurs outside of it. So objective idealism believes in a complex whole. It believes in absolutism. Plato is regarded as one of the earliest representatives of objective idealism. The definitive formulation of the doctrine came from the German idealist Schelling and later developed by Hegel in his absolute idealism theory, as we discussed in our previous lecture while discussing Hegel's idealism. A large number of idealists from Plato to Hegel and the present reject subjective idealism or mentalism, and also the view that world is in any real sense man-made. They do not accept the principle of to be is to be perceived. They regard the organization and form of the world and hence knowledge as determined by nature of the world itself. The mind discovers what there is in the order of the world. There are idealists in that they interpret the universe as an intelligible order whose systematic structure is expressive of rational order and value. When they say that ultimate nature of universe is mind, they mean that the universe is expressive essentially of the mental or spiritual in character, and that it is an organic whole. It's not segregated, it's an organic whole, it's a system. Although the term idealism has been used only in recent times to designate the school of philosophic thought, that beginnings of idealistic speculation in Western civilization are often attributed to Plato, as earlier discussed. Some idealists maintain that all parts of the world are included in one all-embracing order which finds this unity in the ideals and purposes of an absolute mind. Hegel, a very famous German idealist, represents one of the best-known systems of absolute or monistic idealism. His system is sometimes called evolutionary, logical idealism. Thought is the essence of the universe, and nature is the whole of mind, objectified. The universe is an unfolding process of thought. Nature is the absolute reason expressing itself in outward form. Consequently, the laws of thought are also the laws of reality. Now, what are the laws of thought? We are going to discuss later on when we are discussing logic. There are laws of thought in logic. History is the way the absolute appears in nature and human experience. So in this term, he also explained the process of history. Since the world is one and since it is purposive and intelligent, it must be of nature of thought. The world expresses itself in our thinking. Our thinking does not determine the nature of the world. When we think of the total world order as embracing the inorganic, the organic, and spiritual levels of existence in one all-inclusive order, we speak of the absolute or the absolute spirit, and that absolute spirit for Hegel is God. So God, the absolute spirit or the absolute idea, basically is the integrated whole. It connects the parts of the reality. Instead of the fixed or static reality and separate and complete self of traditional philosophy, Hegel sets forth a dynamic conception of self that is so interrelated with its environment that a clear-cut distinction cannot be drawn between the two. The self is in and is experiencing reality at all times. Thus, we have the conception of concrete universe. The universal is present in all the experiences of dynamic process. In such a philosophy, distinctions and differences belong to the phenomenal world and are relative. They do not affect the unity of one purposive intelligence. Since the time of Hegel, there have been many systems of objective idealism. But the foundation or the basis were provided by Hegel, who considers the absolute idea, that is God. And we, while living in this world, we experience it all the time. But because we are connected, we are experiencing reality all the time. But as we have different experiences, that's why sometimes or most of the time we are detached from that absolute idea. This is what he calls objective idealism, or this is what is called objective idealism or absolute idealism. So I hope this makes sense, and now we are going to move to the next kind of school of idealism, that is called absolute idealism. Absolute idealism, formulated by Hegel, says that in order for human reason to be able to know the world at all, there must be an identity of thought and being. Otherwise, we would never have any means of access to the world, and we would have no certainty about any of our knowledge. He argues that the exercise of reason enables the reasoner to achieve a kind of reality, namely self-determination or reality as oneself, that mere physical objects like rocks can never achieve. The interaction of opposite or dialects generates all kind of concepts we use in order to understand the world. And this occurs both in the individual mind as well as through history. And this is the ideology of Hegel, which was later on used by Karl Marx in terms of materialism, and hence his philosophy is called dialectical materialism. And when he tries to interpret history in terms of matter, uh, as opposite to Hegel, who interprets history in terms of ideals, uh, Marx, when explaining it in terms of matter, his theory is called historical materialism. Now, there are certain other types of idealism uh, which by no means are less important, but due to the shortage of time, we cannot discuss those in more detail. So I'll just give a brief idea to you that what are the different types of idealism apart from these four major. And the first one is called epistemological idealism, that asserts that minds are aware or perceive only their own ideas, representations, or mental images, and not external objects, and therefore we cannot directly know things in themselves or things as they really are. And this is epistemological idealism, and somehow it is related to transcendental idealism. If you just recap what we discussed in transcendental idealism, things in themselves, noumena, we cannot know those. The other type of idealism is actual idealism. It is a form of idealism developed by a philosopher who was Italian. His name was Giuliani Gentile. His system saw thought as all-embracing and claimed that no one could actually leave the sphere of thinking or exceed their own thought. And somehow that's true. If you reflect closely, would you be able to get rid of your thoughts? I don't think so. We cannot, even by trying our best, we cannot leave the sphere of thinking. That is why they think, that is why they claim that reality is ideal in nature, because we cannot, even if how hard we try, we cannot get out of our thinking. Next comes the practical idealism. Practical idealism is a political philosophy which holds it to be an ethical imperative to implement ideals of virtue or good. It is therefore translated and it is therefore unrelated to idealism in other sense, but somehow it also talks about moral ideals or political ideals. And when we talk about ideals, obviously they are related to idea, and idea is related to mind. So reality, in order to know and to implement its principles, we need mind, because they are mental in character, they are ideal in nature. Hence it is called practical idealism, because when we try to put those ideas into practice, political ideals into practice, it becomes practical idealism. Again, these are the two main books which I would recommend again to have a look. And if you could not uh, grasp or could not think, could not understand any concept or any part of this lecture, even after reading this book, please do let me know so that we can explain it in our next lecture before starting a new topic. I hope it does make a sense. And till then, I hope you stay well and safe and take good care of yourself. And I will see you in the next lecture. Thank you very much and goodbye.